Good evening. I'm Gina Roberts, Voter Education Director for the Citizens Clean Elections Commission. As the state's only nonpartisan voter education agency, Clean Elections is proud to sponsor these debates. Our mission is to ensure that you have the opportunity to hear directly from the candidates, ask questions about the issues that impact your life, and head to the polls with confidence. To make sure your voice is heard, please keep these upcoming deadlines in mind. June 22nd is the voter registration deadline, June 24th, early voting begins, and July 21st is primary election day. A quick reminder, all registered voters, including independents, are eligible to vote in the upcoming primary election. If you're watching this debate live, we want to hear from you. You can submit a question for the candidates at any time using one of the following methods. You can email debates@kc-a.com. You can text 480-769-9511 or phone 480-937-1253. Thank you for joining us and for staying engaged in our democracy. For more resources to help you prepare for the upcoming July 21st primary election, please visit our website at azcleanelections.gov. Enjoy the debate.
Good evening and welcome to the Arizona Clean Elections debate for Legislative District 8, the Democratic primary. I'm Nicole Ludden. I'm a reporter with the Arizona Agenda and I'll be your moderator. First up tonight, you're going to hear from three candidates running in the Democratic primary for the State House of Representatives in Legislative District 8. That's Janine Connolly, Brian Garcia, and Claudia Klein. Then we're going to switch gears to hear from the district's two Democratic Senate candidates, Lauren Kuby and Deborah Nardozzi. Legislative District 8 is a strong Democratic district that includes parts of Tempe, Phoenix, Scottsdale, Mesa, and the Salt River Pima-Maricopa Indian community. Voters in LD8 will elect one state senator and two state representatives. Tonight's candidates are competing on the same ballot to make it through the primary. Here's how the debate will go. Each candidate will start with a 90-second opening statement, then we'll spend a few minutes getting to know who these candidates are as people. We'll dig into the core issues facing this district, then ask each candidate to explain how they would have voted on a real bill from this session. Time permitting, we'll do a rapid-fire round, then we'll finish with 90-second closing statements. Okay, let's get started. Candidates, thank you so much for being here. We'll start with 90-second opening statements. Janine, you're up first. Tell the voters who you are and why you're running.
Thank you, Nicole. Good evening. And I want to first thank the Clean Elections group for bringing this together. It's such an incredible opportunity. Thank you so much. Nicole, thanks for being here. And Brian and Claudia, it's very nice to see you both. I'm Janine Connolly, and I am your current representative in LD8. I had a really great first term. I like to think of it as starting a successful track record. I work very hard on affordability. I've run some consumer protection program bills that are in to put money in your pocket that actually is your money to begin with. Also, I am a warrior for housing, working very hard on housing, working to make some progress on affordable housing. I love job creation. I consistently vote for jobs that would balance local and state economies, but the main thing to remember in that is that I vote for jobs. And I have an energy and water background, very strong energy and water background. I spent my career at SRP. And because of that, was chosen for the Western Energy Caucus, so working with the 10 Western states on energy policy and wildfire policy, which is very exciting. So I feel like, ensuring energy needs and having reliable, sustainable power into the future is a vital part of what I do while maintaining affordable customer rates. And so I don't disregard education. I back all the educators on the floor, and also very concerned about healthcare and all of the concerns of our constituents in LD8. I'm very humbled to serve, and I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Brian, you're up next.
Thank you so much. Hola a todos. Hello, my name is Brian Garcia, state representative here for LD8, running for re-election. For my family, education is the American dream. I was born and raised in Arizona by parents from El Salvador and the Pascua Yaqui tribe in Mexico. Upon becoming citizens, they fought to ensure my brother Aaron and myself had access to opportunities. This is home. I was raised by our community. I'm the first one in my family to graduate high school, go to college, graduate school, and earn a law degree to become an attorney. I'm a community advocate. an attorney and a proud product of the LD8 community. As a first-generation graduate of our local public schools, I served on the Tempe Union High School Board as president and vice president, and I've been fighting to protect public education, advocating for pro-democracy policies, and representing unaccompanied children. As a freshman legislator, I'm proud to say we've delivered, and we're only getting started. A couple of highlights: co-sponsored bills signed into law, budget wins like securing millions of dollars for our public schools, free school meals, fully funding access, the largest investment in childcare, in the last 10 years, zeroing out the state's ICE reimbursement fund, and recently a 3-year tax exemption moratorium on the new data centers. As the only candidate in this race running clean, I continue to run clean because I'm tired of the working families like mine being sold to the highest corporate bidder. I'm grateful to earn the endorsements of strong progressive coalition of individuals and organizations that are fighting to protect our communities, putting our families first, and fighting for an Arizona we can afford. I look forward to our discussion tonight, and thank you, Clean Elections, and everyone for joining us.
Alrighty, and Claudia, tell the voters about you and why you're running.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Claudia Klein. I'm a big sister, an auntie, a mentor, and lifelong Arizonan. I'm also 26 years old. Today, I serve on a handful of Young Democrat executive boards from the county level up to the national level. I'm a community organizer and a co-founder of Rural Liberation, which is an organization focused on mobilizing rural voters. I would say my commitment to public service came from my family as well and my educators. I was raised by a single mom who became a parent at 15. So we relied a lot on public transportation, community support for childcare, and at times unstable housing. But I also watched my mom open our home and share what little we had with family, friends, and neighbors. So coupled with the support I received from my educators, those experiences really taught me that community care is an action, not just a value. And so for nearly a decade, I've been able to organize across Arizona, from voter registration drives and protest mobilizations to testifying at the Capitol and helping write policy alongside some community coalitions. I fought for tenant protections, affordable housing, environmental justice in rural communities in states like California, Arizona, and Colorado. And then during my undergrad, I worked with refugee communities alongside the border, supported conservation and land reclamation with indigenous communities in Maasai land, Kenya. And yeah, my partner and I moved to LD8 to build our future together. But like so many Arizonans, we've been priced out time and time again, living in 4 different places over the last 6 years. So that experience definitely strengthened my belief that everyone deserves affordable housing, economic opportunity, and a government that works for working people. And that's why I'm here. And thank you for hosting this space.
Thank you so much. We're going to go ahead and move on to our first round of questions. But first, a quick reminder for viewers. You can submit a question for the candidates at any time by emailing debates@kc-a.com. You can text 480-769-9511 or call 480-937-1253. All right, this first segment is about who you are, not your policy positions, but what shaped you, how you think, and who you'd be if elected to office. Each candidate has 90 seconds to answer, no rebuttals in this round. First up, take us back to the specific moment you decided to run. Where were you, what was happening around you, and what pushed you over the edge? Brian, you're up first for this one.
Yeah, great question. I remember very vividly. I was sitting at home, and I remember getting a few calls because this was right after we had an last-minute vacancy to this current seat. And we were about 9 days away from the deadline to file for running for the seat outright. And for me, I was already working in voting rights. I was an attorney for a local or multi-state organization, doing in-house counsel work, absolutely loving it. And I had been 2 years out from the school board, and so private life was great. And but seeing what was happening in the world and wanting to get more directly involved, a few folks had reached out and called and asked if I would consider a run. I said no a couple of times, mostly because I felt that at its core, voting rights is what opens up the doors to all the issues that we care about and making sure that our electorate reflects that. 2 days later, I decided to say yes, jump in. There are a lot of people jumping into the pool for the seat, but at the end of the day, I felt like, right, as someone who was raised in this district, went to all of our public schools, it was important to have that local voice from the get-go. And within those 7 days, we collected over 400 votes or 400 signatures to qualify for the ballot. And it wouldn't have been possible without all the volunteers and advocates and mentors who've gone above and beyond to make sure that, that was a reality. And so it's a privilege to serve, and I'm grateful to be able to serve our district and our state in that way.
All right, thank you. Claudia, you're up next.
Yeah, so early on, I think I was 9 years old when I started learning about how all of this was, all of the issues that my family and even my teachers were experiencing were political issues that had policy solutions. And so I'd gotten involved early on, thinking I was just going to work on the back end of these campaigns. I'd worked on the, hand in hand with the Democratic Party at points. And I think for me, what really did it is understanding the impacts of my family in the rural that still live in rural communities. Like our water is a big issue that we're facing in Arizona right now, along with my grandfather is very ill from the extreme heat, and family members are still like not even just worrying about affording homes, but paying their rent. And so that, and I guess coupled with some attitudes and lack of concern around ICE, I think that I had enough. But that I just, I'd worked in this space for so long. And I did also have some friends and family reach out to me about jumping in. And I'm honestly just super thankful too for the support of people who've never really participated in this system before. I have family members who don't have their voting rights themselves and have still come hit the doors when we were gathering signatures. And it's just really brought me joy to watch them participate in a system that they hadn't really participated in prior. So with that, I was like, yeah, we got this. We dove head first, and it was a lot of things. I think what really did it though was that stuff that was happening with ICE, I would say, just to shorten it up.
Yeah, thank you. And Janine.
Well, I had retired and I was traveling. I had a great life. And I was in Oregon the morning after the 22 primary, my laptop, and saw who had come through in a couple of different seats, and I was very, very uncomfortable with it. I mean, I lit on fire. I started making calls. I called 100 people that I know that would talk to me, and went and talked to them about, we can't do this. We cannot let this happen for a number of reasons. And the candidates that I joined the LD, I became a PC, I did all of it, and the candidates I was advocating for did come through, which was wonderful. My son-in-law said to me, well, what are you going to do next? And so I started meeting with high-level people, people that have been not high level, but people who have been involved in politics for a long time in our area, and then also serving at the legislature. What do you see in LD8? What would you like to see in LD8? And then they told me to talk to people, and they told me to talk to 2 people, and pretty soon I had interviewed 35 people about this. One of them called me one day and said, come back to my office. I need to talk to you tomorrow. So I went back to his office, much younger than I am. He looks at me and said to me, so you're on a pension, right? And I said, are you calling me old right now? And he said, no, I'm just pointing out, you don't have to worry about money. You could go downtown. I'm getting this face, I'm getting this look. And finally, he just said, Janine, the things you're doing, the way you're going about this, the questions you're asking, the messages you're creating, he goes, you are the candidate. Talk to your family. And that was the moment. And I did have to really think about talking to my family.
All right, thank you so much. Next question for our candidates. If you weren't running in this race, what would you be looking for in a candidate to get your vote? Claudia, you're up first here.
I would look for someone who is willing to take a stand, I think based on my experiences as a young voter, we are constantly seeing our elected officials play the middle, which I think why all these Democratic elections are being primaried. And I would want somebody who leads with their values, not working hand in hand with the corporations that are quite literally making life less affordable and harming our community, truthfully. So yeah, I would say those are the two things.
Okay, thank you. And then Janine?
I think somebody who has a sense of the state. I recognize that we're very strongly, representing our LD and our constituency, and I think that we do that well in LD8. But I think also you need to have, pretty good education statewide, what goes on in the nooks and crannies, of what people need, and how people differ. I think you have to really care when you pass policy about not only how it impacts your legislative district, but the state as a whole, because we are that state lawmaking body. So I'd be looking for that. I'd be looking for people who put forward civil dialogue. I'm a huge fan of civil dialogue, and am even on the board of Arizona Talks, a civil dialogue organization. So I'd be looking very seriously for people who can talk politics and talk about their differences civilly. And I also really appreciate an incredibly strong sense of patriotism. I think it's really needed, especially now. And I think that we respect each other's sense of patriotism and have that within ourselves.
Okay, and Brian, what would you be looking for in a candidate?
Yeah, I think first and foremost is an understanding that there's nuance in everything that we do, and just kind of appreciation for that. Being rooted in community, I think also considering that our district is so diverse, right? From everyone from Mesa to Phoenix to North Tempe to South Scottsdale to Salt River, right? Everyone is, yes, facing common issues, but at the same time, very unique issues. And as someone who's a member of the Pasquayake tribe, and being the fifth Native member of this legislature, Native issues always come, as a last thought. And my focus has always been to prioritize and making sure our Native voices are at the table and being part of the decision-making process. And so, with all of that, someone who really embodies the true diversity of what this district is and what it needs, and kind of continuing to build that moving forward.
Okay, we're gonna do one more about you question here. Tell us about the hardest period of your life. How did you get through it, and what did it teach you about yourself? Janine, you're up first for this one.
Thank you. So I think people know by now, there's videos out about this, but when I was 17, my body started to go south on me, and I ended up with an incredible disabling situation, which was kind of hard for a person who was 17. And I had to rethink a lot of things. I ended up getting married and having children, but ended up on my own and still suffering from medical issues. I had a father who said to me, if you just try to go to college, I'll help you, which was an incredible advantage. And it took me 4 years to get my AA at MCC. And then had all my children into school by then, and I could go to ASU full time. I have a bachelor's and I have a master's from ASU. So 10 years in college. And then SRP decided to take a chance on me, medical issues and everything, and hire me into, what became my career path, etc. Those were challenging times, me not knowing if everything we were trying to do was ever going to come together, and having the uncertainty of my health. I had a lot of help, And I'm so grateful. And I see this period of time now that I get to serve as the time that I get to give back to all those people, all those educators who took care of my children. I mean, everybody in my community, the community of Tempe, that were concerned with and seeing that I didn't have family here and needed their aid. So a very difficult thing turned into a very wonderful thing. And now I'll just share the videos out because I had a miracle surgery at Mayo 2 months ago and have resolved my issue. So new lease on life. I'm very grateful.
Yes, that's a good, happy ending. Brian, what about you?
Yeah, back in 2019, I was in law school. I was serving on the school board. My brother was about to graduate from high school. It was in April of 2019, and I was actually on a flight to as a chaperone for the DECA Corona team to compete at nationals, and I got a text message from my dad as I was in the middle seat that he had been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Um, we don't have a history of cancer in our family, and so there wasn't anything to kind of measure or ask or figure out how to kind of, what are the next steps. That was an incredibly devastating period in my life because both, as I mentioned earlier, both my parents are immigrants, and um, when I was going through school, they even struggled, right, to be the parents that I needed in those moments of times because of the language barrier, because of the challenges that they went through, and understanding what the medical world is and how dominated it is by insurance and the rising cost of healthcare. Um, Not only getting the care, but understanding what that diagnosis meant and how to move forward as a family unit, but also understanding that there are financial implications afterward. Even to this day, we are still dealing with my dad's cancer medical debt. And thankfully, a lot of that has been taken care of. But the fact that it's taken this long demonstrates that families shouldn't be going bankrupt because of a diagnosis that's completely out of their control. What I found from that, there were silver linings and strength that came from a horrendous, crisis that impacted our family. Um, and one of those has always gone back to, right, fighting for the policies that we care about, like paid family leave. Unfortunately, right now, I'm actually facing another crisis with my family. My mom recently suffered a stroke at the beginning of the recess of the legislative session, and kind of pulled me back in full circle of realizing how much of these policies would help families like ours to make sure that they can continue living their best lives and not just necessarily existing, but thriving. And so I think at the end of the day, it always comes back to reinvigorating what our fight looks like, and continue pushing for the Arizona that we want, the policies that we want, how we want our government to show up for our communities. Um, but certainly none of that has stopped me and not has stopped our family from continuing fighting to move forward. And so I think there's always going to be a silver lining, and I default to looking for that every step of the way because that is what keeps us going.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And Claudia.
I would say like 2019, 2020 was a really hard time that I'd also had to navigate. I'd just gotten into grad school as like the first in my family to have that opportunity. Or not college, my bad, my bad. But my mom had just had a baby my first semester in November, and that had come with a lot of complications. I remember in the delivery room, they said it was probably going to be just her or it was just going to be the baby. And I was 19 and I was the oldest sibling. So I went from a freshman in college to potentially now having custody of 3 children. And it changed a lot of my life. And then post that, my mom is still a single parent. She worked in healthcare herself and had to provide for all her children. So when she started having seizures and extreme blood loss, it was really hard for me having to drive back and forth because I'd gone to college a few hours away from where my mom had lived, and trying to provide childcare for her where I could, trying to spend as many weekends back home as I could to help. And then The pandemic hit the next year, where I was in college in Prescott. There was maybe 5 students of color, especially after the pandemic, and it was not fun. Prescott is very red. And I mean, even going to the grocery store, I was getting followed down every single aisle, threatened. I didn't have a car at that time because I'd actually just gotten in a car accident as well, forgot that part. But if it weren't for my teachers helping me navigate the program, making sure that I could still work from home, I wouldn't have been able to come back home and help my mom with all the children that she'd had and making sure that we could still afford to keep a roof over all of their heads and make sure that I still got my degree because it was really important to us. And on the, that was really hard for us, but I think it helped my relationship with my mom a lot after the fact. She ended up going back to school and getting a certified medical certificate through a program that Katie Hobbs had done. So, we're a team of hard workers, me and my mom.
All righty, thank you so much. Thank you for that chance to get to know all of you. We're going to turn to the issues voters care about most now. This is the core of tonight's debate. I'll ask a question. Each of you gets 90 seconds to respond. After all of you have answered, I'll open up a 60-second rebuttal window. You can respond to something another candidate said or add to your own answer, and I may ask a follow-up question. So first up, LD8 has lots of students, renters, and new development pressure. What specific policies would you push for at the legislature to keep people from being priced out of housing? And Brian, you're up first for this one.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, I think first and foremost, right, we're looking at the rising costs across the board. Rent stabilization, I think, is one that immediately comes to mind. Going after corporate ownership, we're seeing a lot of those properties being bought up, in addition to short-term rentals taking over communities. My neighborhood is full of short-term rentals, unfortunately, and those not being accessible to families or students. And so when we're thinking about what those developments look like, right, there have been a lot of conversations about what types of developments. Yes, we are looking at affordable housing, but what does affordable housing mean? In a lot of legislation that we've seen, there isn't any defined explanation of what affordable is. And obviously, affordability is very subjective to different people. And so standardizing that across the board and actually incorporating that into our policies instead of, right, seeing developers come in and just buy up properties. Because while something may be affordable, it doesn't mean that the quality is going to be a standard that is sufficient for someone to be living in. I'd rather be fighting for something that's affordable than have a straw house that's going to need, right, more maintenance later down the road, and there's no guarantee that that's affordable. And so as we continue to see more bills, really fighting for something that's actually truly affordable for our communities.
Okay, Claudia?
Yeah, I would echo everything that was mentioned. You mentioned your neighborhood, but I was canvassing in Scottsdale recently, and I went through a cul-de-sac where out of the 8 houses there, only one of them was still a single-family home. The couple talked with me for 20 minutes about the short-term rentals and the Airbnbs or the investment properties that were around them. So, and that pattern, we see it playing out throughout the state. You mentioned the affordability crisis that we're truly in, and I think that it's not really going to be addressed unless we treat housing as a basic need instead of this financial commodity. And we, like Brian mentioned as well, we're building apartment complexes left and right. I know my precinct alone is four apartment buildings in one precinct, so it's very condensed. I think we need to also maybe talk about some zoning laws. I did also read in the Copper Courier recently that cities like Tempe might actually just struggle. So I think that might also need a separate strategy because it's going to take a few more years than the rest of like Scottsdale, Phoenix to fill that deficit.
Okay, thank you. And Janine, what policies would you push for to keep people from being priced out?
Thank you for asking. As first-term legislator, there's really an amazing learning curve, and housing has been one of mine. I feel really passionately about this. I've done a lot of homework, is what I'm trying to say. I showed up at the courts one day and asked if I could sit in on evictions. And they kind of scurried around and figure out, which judge I could sit with. And she was amazing. She was the judge of the judicial district where we are at the Capitol, and she grew up in that area. It was wonderful to learn from her, and I think she made a phone call because the next thing I know, Marston Institute came over to sit down with me and talk about what do you want to do with evictions. And we've had several conversations since. I think we'll be running a bill, and that will come together in the fall. Also, the STR space in North Tempe and South Scottsdale, we see such difficulty. I had a woman invite me into her home one day, very hot outside, but she just wanted to explain to me there's 20 houses on our street, 2 are owner occupied. That means 18 are short-term rentals. And so she told me what her life was like. I listen, we try. I am collaborating with a Republican, Representative Selena Bliss. Believe it or not, she's from Sedona. They have the highest percentage of short-term rentals in the state. And so she's working very hard as well. She tried to move 2 very good bills forward this session, and unfortunately was not successful. But we will not stop, because housing is going to take a million little things. I wrote an article for the January Tempe Tribune. They reached out to me and asked me, what are you looking forward to in 26? And my article is about the middle housing bill coming true into our realm. And I ask people in Tempe to recognize that we are Tempe and that there are appropriate pockets for some middle housing. And that might that might not be your neighborhood, but it might be a neighborhood nearby. And, I'm just asking people not to fight it in general, but to help us find appropriate pockets. We've already started. We've got a Newtown project. We've got some great projects in Tempe, and we have some vacant land that is small enough for middle housing. So that's a big thing, is for me to perpetuate that idea that in Tempe we can accept this, and then in LD8 we can accept this, and then hopefully across the state we can find appropriate pockets for affordable housing. I've been working on starter homes a lot, and last year was asked to run a bill for the League of Cities and Towns to stop a bad starter home bill. And I just want to explain this briefly, because they want to build homes that are built without certain amenities like carports and back patios. And so they're selling them much cheaper, but the people that can buy them are never going to be able to keep up with finishing a carport or putting in a patio, and their home will not acquire as much equity as it should to be a true starter home. So trying to work on that and make sure that we get good starter homes moving forward. Finally,
Thank you. I'm going to ask you to wrap up the final thought there. Okay.
That's fine. Thank you.
Does anybody want to respond to something another candidate said there?
I would just like to add 2 things. One, I think also an investment in rental assistance is essential, as Rep. Conley mentioned, right? The increasing evictions. And one thing too that I like to add with respect to evictions is that in this last year's budget and this current budget, we made $3 million investments in civil legal aid, which also goes to eviction protections for folks who are facing that. Granted, $3 million is not enough each year. There's a lot more need and support that needs to go out there, but it's certainly something that we've been working on and growing to, and we projected that in this budget, and hopefully we continue to increase that investment.
Great. Yeah, go ahead, Claudia.
Yeah, that is another note I made to myself, is these first-time home buyer assistant programs, the rental aid, and these income-based housing, they are not being altered fast enough with the inflation rate. So I think that's another thing that we would have to address.
Okay, thank you. And of course, to build housing, you need water. So I'm going to ask a water policy question next. Would you vote to impose mandatory water restrictions on Arizona household, things like lawn watering limits per person, usage caps, higher prices for heavier users, even if it means your constituents have to rip out landscaping they've had for years? And first up, Claudia, you're up first for this one. Would you impose restrictions like that?
You said on residential areas, right?
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Households.
I think this is something that we would have to, depending on how much water we're allocated, we would have to like seriously address because our water usage is just, it hasn't been planned out properly, I believe, from things that I've seen. I do also think in a state like Arizona, I don't understand the concept of having so like green grass, people paint their grass, people have turf, which also isn't great for us either. I think desert landscapes are what we should be having. Um, and I think if you're utilizing more water, that could be something that could be more pricey for the person who's wasting the most water. I remember my mother-in-law used to teach science, and she would talk about how if you have the faucet on, well, the whole time you're brushing your teeth and have the visual of how much water you're using to do that. So I think also little things like that we can just like learn in school or something. But I do think it's meant more for commercial. I think that's why we are in the situation that we are.
Okay, so maybe you wouldn't support household limits, but for corporate developments. Gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay,
I mean,
oh,
sorry.
yep.
Sorry.
Okay.
We did speak to somebody earlier this month who had talked about construction and how he doesn't like that we have to constantly be watering down dirt because it's gonna like fly away or get into the air. And so that was a big thing he told me to mention.
Okay, thank you. And Janine, you're up next for this question.
Thank you. Thank you. As we all know, water is life, and it is in Arizona our most precious resource. And so very, very important to find ways to conserve. In my experience, and I've watched Gilbert try to do restrictions, there were residential restrictions, and that, I mean, who polices that and how does that go? But the most successful thing I've seen, and this was some time back, so we have data to back it up, was that a brave person from the city of Flagstaff came down to a conference I was attending and said, we're going to charge more for water. We just need people to conserve. And so when they did that, people did naturally start to conserve water. And they started, considering what trees they're planting in their front yard, consider taking out their grass, etc. And each of them finding that appropriate balance between, how much water they needed and how much water they could let go of. And Flagstaff made it through a very difficult time, very difficult drought by charging more for water, which forces conservation. I know it's not popular, but I do think it is the one way that we can strike the balance and really start to move forward on this issue.
Okay, thank you. And Brian.
Yeah, I think it's important to understand the context of, right, what our water situation is, right? Right now, we're in the middle of negotiations with the upper basin states. And as lower basin states, we have less water rights, unfortunately. And because the upper basin states kind of refuse to make any cuts to their allocation of water, inherently by that nature, we have to end up giving and cutting more, especially more than our fair share. While the hope is that we will have a consensus here pretty soon that hopefully respects the equitable division of water rights with the upper basin states and the lower basin states, including Arizona, and the tribal water rights that are involved in that process. Regardless of what that outcome looks like, they will be cuts. And so I think understanding it from that framework to look at what the conservation elements should be considered. And I think first and foremost, going after the corporate usage of water, right? Attorney General Chris Mays has already gone after the Saudis for extracting water. We also don't have, in my view, sufficient groundwater AMAs and the expansion of that to be able to protect our waters. And also looking at how are we institutionally and systematically saving water. When I was on the school board, we renovated our football stadiums from grass stadiums to turf fields. And the number of water savings that allowed us to move forward was immense and reduce our costs, reduce our usage rate across the board. And so like, what other incentive programs are we being able to provide to our residents to, yes, say, conserve water and save water, but primarily going after the corporate usage of that water. Because at the end of the day, that's where most of that is going.
Gotcha. So it sounds like not so much support for residential level, more corporate level.
Well, I think it's right a balance and looking at where that high usage is going and right taking zooming out and seeing where those pockets of high usage are and whether we're actually be conserving and sustaining that. That also goes into the developments. That also goes into right considerations of the different aspects of rising costs. You know, are we charging our corporate users that equitable amount for what their costs and what that waste looks like? So I think it's a surround sound, but I think full context needs to understand what we're facing when it comes to water negotiations with the Upper Basin states.
Okay, thank you. I do want to move into education quickly here. Funding a real teacher raise means finding hundreds of millions of dollars. Where would you find the money? And please name the actual line items you'd cut, taxes you'd increase to pay for it. We're looking for specifics here. And Janine, you're up first.
Lucky me. Well, I do feel very strongly that we need to figure out how to have a better tax base, if that makes sense to you. I mean, the legislature should establish a fair taxing system so that we afford everything, including better education. I think recent laws have been adopted that really give advantage to one side. We kind of touched on it in the housing discussion, but there is a rental tax that was just completely wiped out recently. And the first time renters and we're talking about people who own rental homes, were not required to pay taxes was in January of 25. Then the cities and towns are really suffering from not having a rental tax income any longer. So I think we really need to get back to a system where, you know, people are going to take taxes seriously, that we're going to have an across the board fair taxing system that really does finance the things that we need to finance. And I wouldn't say flat tax. I don't think that I would say cut taxes, raise taxes. I'm just thinking a brand new standard or a brand new model that is fair to everyone living in the state. And we can't, of course, we don't have any purview outside of the state, but living in the state that can allow us to run the state and the needs of the state, particularly education, in a better way.
Okay, thank you. And Brian?
Yeah, I think first and foremost is reining in the expansion of ESA vouchers. It is to the detriment of the original purpose, which was dedicated and designed for special education students. And the expansion itself has ballooned over to $1 billion that could be going directly to public education. In addition to that, I think we need to revisit Prop 123. Unfortunately, we were not able to get Republicans to the table to agree to a Prop 123 deal. That's unfortunate because at the end of the day, it's our students and our teachers that end up hurting the most when we don't have that funding, especially when it comes to school facilities. The state lost in a lawsuit for school facilities, and we're not appropriately funding our school facilities in that manner, and we need to continue our responsibility and our duty to funding that. And part of that comes from the expansion of the vouchers. I think that reversing the flat tax is going to be incredibly hard, but that is something that when Governor Doug Ducey signed into law, it without question hurt our funding mechanisms and our revenues to be able to provide critical services across the state, but especially providing services and funding for public education. I think it also comes back to repealing the aggregate expenditure limit. In last year's budget negotiations, we negotiated a 2-year waiver, which helps our local public schools navigate a little easier. Unfortunately, While we negotiated the 2-year to also count for this year, we're going to have to be back at the table for that next year. And fundamentally, we need to relook at modernizing our public financing system for public education. To incentivize a student at a desk with money over their heads is not a sustainable one, especially when we are looking at low enrollment because of low population growth, all the different affordability challenges that we're facing, the rising cost of everything. And property tax, while a lot of school districts levy that, there are a lot of rural districts that don't have the opportunity to be able to do that in a manner that's consistent. And while we've been fortunate to have one of the lowest property taxes for education in the entire state, it's something that, right, time and again, our voters have prioritized that in the bonds and overrides, and making sure that public education remains first and foremost. And so there are a whole host of things. I think it's certainly not a one-size-fits-all approach, because there are so many needs across the state when it comes to public education, but it's certainly kind of zooming back out and looking at what can we do moving forward.
Okay, and Claudia.
Yeah, I would say removing a tax is going to be really hard to do. I think top of mind, revising the ESA voucher program. Like Brian had mentioned, I've seen schools in my school district be shut down. I know my younger sisters don't really have options to even public schools, and they're 7 and 9 right now. So obviously these programs are not built for what they're not being used for what they were initially built for. So I think if we revise the ESA programs and see that money return to our public schools, there's going to be more opportunity for things like this. I've heard a lot of my friends and family start their families where they're sending their kids to school, or friends that are working 3 jobs to pursue this career that they love so much. And so I think from hearing from all of them, this is one of the number one ways that we can address that.
Okay, thank you so much. We're going to go ahead and move on. Before tonight's debate, each candidate received 3 actual bills from this legislative session. I've picked one of them to ask you about tonight. So I'll read a short summary of the bill, and you'll each have 1 minute to tell the voters 2 things: how you would have voted and why, and no rebuttals in this round. The bill is SB 1431, Housing Design Standards. It would stop cities from forcing new developments to have HOAs, gates, or shared amenities, and would block cities from setting design rules for single-family homes. Cities could still enforce basic safety, building, and parking rules. All right, Brian, you're up first for this one. Can you tell us how you'd vote and why?
Yeah, I was actually ready for this to go up on the board before we sine-died, and I was ready to vote no on this bill, particularly because I do not think that the state should preempt cities. The state has continued to do that for local municipalities and school boards across the state, and also in particular because of the design, the standards, and the design nature of that bill. I mentioned earlier when we talked about housing for a little bit that standards are incredibly important when it comes to housing design, and to water that down does not give dignity to our families who deserve a quality, affordable home that is not a straw house, and really focusing on true affordable housing that allows our families to be able to live in them with dignity, and not just because it's something that it fits within their price range. In addition to the preemption piece around it. And so I would have voted no, and I was ready to vote no on it.
Okay, thank you. Claudia.
Yes, for my understanding of the bill, it was reducing the unnecessary, sorry, I feel like I'm echoing, unnecessary government involvement. So I think I might have interpreted it a little different than Brian. I did see from my research on it that Senator Ortiz had co-sponsored it. So I think that with the exemptions of making sure that there were still those safety standards, community protections, especially for tribal nations, I was ready to vote yes.
Okay, thank you. And Janine.
Yeah, I already touched on this one, which is interesting because it's been part of a long fight for me. But like Brian, I queued it up for a no vote, and I will continue to vote no on bad housing bills because I don't think it does anyone any good. I worked in a development once that was 4 phases, and the first 3 phases were built out in a healthy market, and then they had to go ahead and sell the last phase in a bad market, and they did just exactly what this bill talks about. They built the homes without carports and without back patios. And it was really a shame because they were blaming on the junior high next door. They were blaming on everything in the neighborhood except, how the homes were originally built. They just were not occurring at the same, rate of equity as the other homes. And that was a terrible situation. So as hard as it is not to have affordable housing moving forward, and it's very, very hard, but a lot of us are focused on it and wanting to make it happen. And when it happens, we want it to be right for those young people and older people aging out of large homes that are really taking a big step forward. We want to make that the right step for them and the first step in a new progression for them. So let's build houses that are going to last.
Okay, and thank you so much. And we've reached closing statements. Each candidate will get 90 seconds, and we're going to do this in the same order as your opening statements, which means, Janine, you're up first whenever you're ready. Give a closing statement.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nicole. And again, thank you to Clean Elections. This has been a really good evening to spend with Brian and Claudia. I appreciate how well the debate went and your positive attitudes and especially your opinions on these things. So for all who are listening, I'm continually surprised, given that I didn't really set out to be the candidate, at how well suited I am for this job, and very grateful that people saw talents and experience in me that I didn't really know would be a good fit for this job. And so I'm just really enjoying this culmination of all my life experience and putting it into caring about constituents, worrying about their problems, answering their emails, helping them get SNAP benefits, figure out what's wrong with, a number of things that are going wrong in their lives right now. So I have an enormous capacity for working with constituencies, and I have a great love for the state of Arizona. And I'm Janine Connolly. I want to continue to serve you, and I hope that you'll consider me for your vote in the primary on July 21st. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Brian, you're up next.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in and listening. I'm grateful for the community and for all the work that we've been able to do. I'm a tested and trusted leader. I ask for your vote because there's too much stake in this election. We have been on the front lines and in the community and will continue to be. We are not taking any money from corporate and utility special interests. I'm grateful to earn the endorsements of a strong, progressive coalition of individuals and organizations that are fighting for the issues on the front lines. Endorsements from Arizona Attorney General Chris Mays, Bernie Sanders, UFCW, Sierra Club, Unite Here, Local 11, Worker Power, LGBTQ Victory Fund, the Teamsters, Civic Engagement Beyond Voting, the Arizona Nurses Association Committee, Communication Workers of America, Sheet Metal Workers, the Painters, the Iron Workers, Indivisible Mesa, the Voting Rights Fund, the New American Leaders, Equality Arizona, Maricopa Young Dems, the Arizona College Dems, the Maricopa Area Labor Federation, Run for Something, the Working Families Party, and Growing. The choice is clear on education, experience, housing, affordability, and campaign finances. My name is Brian Garcia, your current state representative for the Legislative District 8. I hope to earn your vote to continue this fight for an Arizona we can afford. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. And Claudia.
Yes, I also just want to thank you again for this opportunity. But once again, my name is Claudia Klein, a lifelong Arizonan community organizer, advocate, and a candidate for LD8, running to bring urgency, accountability, and working class experience to this district. Tonight, we've heard a lot about Arizona's challenges, but what's still missing is urgency that matches what people are actually living. So for the families I meet at the doors, these issues aren't abstract. their rent payments being late, childcare costs that don't stop, healthcare decisions being put off because they can't afford it. And while our district is blue, we know that party label is not enough. We need progressive leadership that understands representation is more than casting votes. It's showing up and standing with our community in difficult moments, listening when people are hurting and fighting alongside them, not just speaking for them. Across this country, voters are putting their faith in a new generation of progressive leaders who are stepping up, organizing, and delivering results. So Arizona has an opportunity to be a part of that story. So I ask for your vote and invite you to learn more about me at claudia4az.com. And if you want different results, we have to choose different leadership. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That concludes tonight's Democratic primary debate for the State House and Legislative District 8. Thank you to the candidates for being here, and to our voters, thank you for tuning in and informing yourselves ahead of the July 21st primary election. For official information, you can visit azcleanelections.gov. The Democratic primary election debate for the district Senate seat will begin shortly, so stay with us through this short break. Good evening and welcome back to the Arizona Clean Elections debate for Legislative District 8, the Democratic primary. I'm Nicole Ludden, a reporter with the Arizona Agenda, and I'll be your moderator. Tonight, you'll hear from two Democratic Senate candidates competing for Legislative District 8's Senate seat. This is a strong Democratic district that includes parts of Tempe, Phoenix, Scottsdale, Mesa, and the Salt River Pima-Maricopa Indian community. Each candidate will start with a 90-second opening statement, then we'll spend a few minutes getting to know who these candidates are as people. We'll dig into the core issues facing this district, then ask each candidate to explain how they would have voted on a real bill from the session. Time permitting, we'll do a rapid fire round, and we'll finish with 90-second closing statements. Okay, let's get started. Candidates, thank you so much for being here. We'll start with 90-second opening statements, and Lauren, you're up first for this one.
Thank you. So glad to be here. I'm Lauren Kuby. I'm running for re-election to the state Senate to continue to serve you over the interests of corporations, utilities, and developers. For decades, I served as an ASU Global Future Scientist, leading outreach and studying the impact of our climate crisis on our communities. I led ASU Stardust Center for Affordable Homes in the Family, researching and enacting housing policy that builds healthy communities. And I served on the city council for 8 years, where I spearheaded laws that mattered: affordable housing, worker safeguards, LGBTQ+ protections, climate solutions, and campaign finance reform. And now, it's my honor to serve you as your state senator. I've been standing up, speaking out, and meeting the moment. And together, we've gained major progressive wins for our district. We secured $2 million in direct housing assistance, completely eliminated ICE funding from our budget, and taken on utilities and corporations who are raising the cost of living for working people. And the work is just beginning. But now, our proven progressive record is being threatened by corporate special interests who are funneling thousands of dollars into buying this district. I'm running for re-election because there is so much at stake for our communities, for our children, for my sweet grandchildren, Rory and Marlo. I hope you'll join me and vote to keep Kuby in the Arizona State Senate.
Thank you. And Deborah, you're up next.
Thank you, Nicole. Hi, I'm Deborah Nardozzi, and I'm running for the state Senate seat. I have been knocking on doors in this district as a community advocate and for campaigns since at least 2016. And unfortunately, the conversations at these doors really haven't changed that much. Families are worried about whether or not they can afford to stay in the neighborhoods where they built their lives. Parents are doing hard childcare math that frankly just does not work out. And teachers are driving 45 minutes or more just to get to the school district where they work because there's no way they could even afford to live nearby. I'm a member of the queer community, a single mom raising my 2 kids through the educational system right here in District 8. I run a very small business, and I sit at the same kitchen table that a lot of you do, and I do that same math every month. I built the South Scottsdale Democrats Club when people needed to be part of a community. And as a campaign manager, I flipped legislative seats from Republican to Democrat that insiders had frankly written off. And I also served in the Arizona State House, so I have a progressive voting record you can actually verify. And I was part of the heavy lift to get the Arizona 1864 total abortion ban repealed. And I want to say something very clearly tonight. I am running to fight for housing, schools, and childcare in this district. And I'm also running because the state legislature has to be a shield against the MAGA agenda coming out of Washington right now. Arizona families deserve a senator who knows how to do both, and I'm ready for it.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to our first round of questions, but first, a quick reminder for our viewers. You can submit a question for the candidates at any time by emailing debates@kc-a.com, texting 480-769-9511, or calling 480-937-1253. Okay, this first segment is about who you are, not your policy positions, but what shaped you, how you think, and who you'd be once elected to office. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to answer. First up, if you weren't running in this race, what would you be looking for in a candidate to get your vote? Deborah, you're up first for this one.
Great, thank you. We have never had a state senator elected from South Scottsdale as a Democrat before, and I would really love to see that. Currently, all 3 legislators are from Tempe. We've had all 3 legislators from Phoenix. I know we have 3 legislators in Mesa because I was their campaign manager and got them all elected back in 2022. We've had a lot of geographical diversity, but South Scottsdale is a very unique district, and I would love to see someone finally come from that area. Outside of that, someone that lives my true progressive values, someone who hasn't just really felt these votes as from community outside in, but really truly lived these values. I grew up very poor, and it's really nice to be able to have that perspective in a way, because I understand every single time I'm at a door and I talk to someone who's struggling, I've been there, my family's been there, and honestly, sometimes the past few months I've been there. So that's what I would look for.
Okay, thank you. And Lauren, what would you look for in a candidate?
Yeah, I would look for who they truly represent. So I want someone who represents all the 4 cities in this district and the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian community. And I've been really proud to represent all the parts of this district. And I'm not just running to represent a city. And I very much want someone who embodies the progressive values of Legislative District 8 and follows the legacy of this district, which is not to accept lobbyist, utility developer, or corporate money. So I'm really proud to be the only candidate who rejects corporate special interest money because I'm doing more than talking the talk, I'm walking the walk. My opponent can't say the same. And I do want to say I grew up in a family, a loud, boisterous Irish family, 6 kids, very middle class. My dad was a news dealer, and I'm very proud to represent working families in this state. And I'm so proud that the Arizona Democratic Party is working towards an affordable Arizona for us all.
Okay. Next up, tell us about one of the hardest periods of your life. How did you get through it, and what did it teach you about yourself? Lauren, you're up first for this one.
Well, this is like Oprah question, right?
Yeah, it's deep. It's deep.
Next, you're going to be asking me, what tree am I, right? So I guess I'd say for a period of time after college, I was unemployed. And I searched job after job, trying to find a way to provide for myself and my family. My husband and I had moved to a new city, had never lived there before. It was in Boston. So I know what it means to face hard economic times and make the most with very little money. So I began to volunteer with community organizations and campaigns, and I eventually secured a job at running the homeless hotline in Boston. It was part of the Dukakis administration. And that homeless hotline provided services to our unhoused neighbors. I got very involved then with politics, seeing how policy changes can really impact people for worse, but also for better. And so I believe I bring the empathy and experience from those times with me as I fight for working families in the state Senate. And when I secured $2 million for direct housing assistance and heat relief last year, it was personal to me. And now I'm really grateful to be a lawmaker who can advocate for the most vulnerable in our community, and I'll always continue to do so.
All right, thank you. And Deborah, what about you?
COVID. I mean, when COVID happened and the pandemic hit, and all of a sudden I immediately had no source of income at all because my small business was just me working in person in front of people. It was very difficult. I had to look at my kids every day and try to navigate these little ones being on all of a sudden Zoom, which no one had ever really heard of before. Trying to figure out how we were going to support ourselves, how we were going to get, our mortgage paid, how I was going to get groceries. I had friends who unfortunately lost parents, siblings, uncles, aunts, cousins. It was a very dire time. I remember talking to one of my friends who was trying to pick up some gig economy jobs, and he said that he went to do DoorDash, and there were like a server that they had found outside of one of the grocery stores, Sprouts or something, that they knew that those ticket items came through, and people had poles with their phones on them trying to get them as close to the server as possible so they could pick up that job first. And what it basically taught us, and I think the entire society learned a lot of this lesson, is how much when we come together, we can support each other, how often we can rely on our neighbors, and how often we can give something when we have feels like nothing left to give.
Okay, thank you. This last question of this round isn't quite as deep. Describe a time in the last 2 years when you changed your mind on something political and what changed it. Deborah, you're up first for this one.
Sure. When I was in the legislature, there was a bill coming forward to do battery-powered ATVs. And I thought, that's amazing. That's cool. This is great for the environment. Let's go ahead and do this. Why would we not, support this? And the Sierra Club came to me, and I'm an A with Sierra Club. So obviously I share their values and I listen to them as well, and they're lobbyists. And after sitting down, I realized that, these made the ATVs heavier, and it destroyed the Earth's crust. It was also a group of moms came to talk to me because these would now be so heavy that having young children, unlicensed young children driving these ATVs, found that they were more deadly. These ATVs could hit another child or flip, and they were so heavy that they could cause a lot of injuries. And so it took a lot of maneuvering, amendments, going back and forth, and eventually we ended up doing a higher licensing fee so that the Earth's crust that was being damaged with the heavier vehicles could be mitigated. We decided to do a slightly older licensing for them so that older kids were driving these more heavy vehicles. But it really put into my mindset that, everything needs to be analyzed, everything needs to be discussed. You need the data points on all of it. And what originally I was like, oh, this is a great idea. And then I was like, oh, this is a bad idea. And then I was able to figure out the amendments and get it forward.
All right, thank you. And Lauren.
So a couple years ago, I was approached to run for the Salt River Project Board. And we all know about the acreage-based system, right? Acres are people too, my friend. And I thought it'd be impossible to win because my opponent had 573 acres. I had an eighth of an acre. So, I just assumed, well, the wealthy landowners would win, and they did. But I decided I had to run because I thought maybe I could start a movement. I was proud to be endorsed by Sierra Club. They encouraged me to run. They wanted me to really lead a movement, and we won an acreage-based seat that led to the SRP board flipping. For the first time in 123 years, we have a board that is actually representing the interests of consumers and working people and the climate movement. So, I was able to really help build a coalition with community partners. We fought hard. We brought attention to this race in 2024. I was so glad that my initial reaction, which was like, no, I'm not doing this, that I overturned that. And I was so glad that Sierra Club came behind me and supported me, and they even gave me an A+ rating, not just an A rating, but an A+ rating. So that to me is, somewhere where I just changed my mind, and changing it was the community saying, you need to do this for us.
Okay, thank you so much. We're going to move into the core of tonight's debate now, the issues voters told us matters most in this district. I'll ask a question, and each of you will get 90 seconds to respond. After all of you have answered, I'll open a 60-second rebuttal window. You can respond to something your opponent said or add to your own answer and may ask a follow-up question. First up, Arizona has a housing crisis, and Democrats don't all agree on what's driving it. What's your diagnosis for who or what is primarily to blame, and what state-level policies do you support to address it? Lauren, you're up first for this one.
Thanks. Well, the legislature is to blame. They've made it illegal for cities to regulate short-term rentals. They've made it illegal for cities to require affordable housing in a given housing project. And we have corporations coming in to buy homes before a family even has a chance to make an offer on a home. So we are in a housing crisis. And most legislation that I've seen come down the pike, it's, divided government. These are Republican bills. It lacks the definition of affordability. It would only benefit billionaire developers, just like the ones that are funding my opponent's campaign, frankly. So my experience, for decades, I led the ASU Center for Affordable Homes and the Family. I researched and enacted affordable housing. I understand the impact of housing on healthy communities and vice versa. Now, in City Council, I created the Affordable Housing Impact Statement, the first in Arizona, and that set policy to make housing a priority for our council. I stood up to developers. I pushed them to guarantee affordability in their projects as requirements in their developments if they wanted to have any kind of incentive from the city. So what's the problem solution here? Well, inclusionary zoning is a law that is all over the country that requires a city, it gives cities the authority to require a development have a given percentage of affordable housing. That is illegal in Arizona. So we need to repeal inclusionary zoning. It's kind of a nerdy, weedy topic, but we need to repeal that. That's probably one of the first bills that's going to go up. And I know my colleague, Annalise Ortiz, and I agree so much on that. And then we have to repeal a prohibition on rent stabilization. We've discovered through Bobby Nichols, he's in Tempe City Council and just elected, that if a city gives money or subsidizes a given development by giving land or giving some kind of incentive, then they can actually stabilize the rents and have a rent stabilization board in that city, even without the law changing. But we need to change the law at the state level as well. And lastly, we need to invest in public-private partnerships with nonprofit housing developers. I'm talking about community land trusts like Newtown in my district that's done a phenomenal job of creating permanently affordable homes, or Native American connections, groups that understand the niche market of affordable housing, that know how to get those projects done because they're complicated, right? And profit developers, billionaires, they're interested in bulldozing, but they're not interested in creating affordable housing, or they would have done it. So that's my approach, and those are some of the solutions that we can start to enact should we gain a majority, and we're going to gain a majority in this November.
Okay, thank you. And Deborah, what's your diagnosis for housing here?
Oh, big topic. I do agree with a lot of what Senator Kuby said. I believe also that most of the development issues that we have are we're not building enough. We had a 12% decrease in single-family home building permits from 2024 to 2025, and the multifamily building permits were down 30% in that same month. One example that I would give is the casita bill that I voted on during my tenure at the State House. I had a constituent call me in tears asking for my yes vote on the casita bill because he had just built one for his mother-in-law to care for her during her end of life because she had cancer. Unfortunately, she died very unexpectedly, very quickly, and he was left with a very high mortgage on this casita that he had built, and he was at risk of losing his home. Because I voted on that casita bill and opened up zoning laws and regulations for some of the cities, including the city of Scottsdale, he was actually able to rent that to an ASU student to help cover the extra expense and save his home.
Okay.
Can I speak to this issue and rebut?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the problems with the casita bill, though, is that it's really fed into the whole short-term rental market, and so we don't see a lot of places being rented in a long-term way with the ADUs. So that's a concern. Also, I was speaking with Kate Gallego, Mayor of Phoenix, and she mentioned that there's over 60,000 units that have been approved that are ready for building. Now, there's different factors that impact that, but there is a supply and demand issue for sure, but a lot of these developers are holding on to that potential supply because they want to control the market. We actually have pretty high vacancies right now. The supply solution is not the solution, it is part of the solution. But we need to really rein in corporate ownership. We need to create real affordable housing, not just luxury market rate housing, which in my experience in Tempe, as a council member for 8 years, we saw lots of new housing, but there was just little nibbles, little tiny bits of affordable housing. So we need to really work to supercharge affordable and workforce housing. And we need to make sure that the laws we put in aren't designed by developers with interests, with corporate special interests. We need to ensure that they're built by the community. Communities have a lot to say about development in their area. People assume it's NIMBY. No, they're not. They want to have a community that really works for them, that is shaded, that has bus stops, that has access to sidewalks. And so, this is an issue that we need to really ensure that short-term rentals don't just, it's an existential crisis in our neighborhoods. We need to make sure that short-term rentals don't take over our neighborhoods.
Okay,
Can
get
I
ready
have a rebuttal as well?
Yeah, of course.
Thank you. Not again about housing, but you've mentioned a few times about some billionaire developer donor that I have. So you may have Googled the wrong name, but I am absolutely proud to have a wide coalition of small dollar to large dollar donors and everything in between, from Democrats, independents, and Republicans. These people are all supporting my race because they know I'm not going to be obstructive. I'm going to move policy forward for the people of LD8. And honestly, I'm offended that you're insinuating that my vote is for sale. It wasn't when I was in office, and it is not now. And Lauren, I recommend you handle your own dark money donors before you come for me, because you have thousands in anonymous donations, including a $1,000 donation from a man with no address, no occupation, and a fake employer. So who really gave you that $1,000? You take money from special interests, but that are only in your bubble. You accept money from millionaires. You were on the board of the Arizona Democratic Legislative Caucus Committee, which had filed a formal complaint against y'all for campaign finance violations. So I think the phrase, those living in glass houses shouldn't throw stones, maybe look in your own backyard.
Well,
Lauren, you want to
certainly should be able to rebut that.
Yeah.
And so I encourage everyone to go, pardon?
Yeah, I just said quickly here, yeah.
Yeah, please, everyone go to see the money, and you will see, that I think in the first, the cumulative 1-year report, like over 30% of the donations that came in from my opponent come from lobbyists and utilities. She received a $3,000 donation from SRP just, days after the last finance reporting period ended. And so I just invite people, go look and see that. And also, I am working to flip the legislature with the Arizona Democratic Legislative Campaign Committee. So I never have run a race where I haven't been working with other people and trying to build the movement. And that's what I'm doing.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and move on here, guys.
Sure, because she got two.
Okay, go ahead really quickly. You're right.
Okay,
yes.
So regarding the utilities, that's a PAC check. So all union members and company employees that donate to their PACs deserve representation too. Your attitude that you only give legitimacy to PACs that you agree with needs to change. Thank you.
Okay. Arizona's flat 2.5% income tax, a star of state services. Would you vote to raise income taxes on households making over $250,000 a year to fund things like school and health care? Deborah, you're first for this one.
Yeah, I sure would.
Easy enough.
Yeah, we have an issue with it, and so that's one great avenue.
Okay. Lauren, what about you? Would you raise taxes at that income level?
So here's the truth. We're not broke. We're being robbed. Millionaires are taxed at the same rate as working people here in Arizona. And while our budget is being drained year after year by tax cuts for the wealthy and our out of control ESA voucher system. So Every year we face Republican cuts to Medicaid, SNAP, and other programs, and every year I've successfully worked to stop those cuts with the Democratic caucus in a collaborative style. But so much more needs to be done. So yes, I would happily support a progressive tax structure that would pass the burden onto the ultra wealthy while funding healthcare, education, and infrastructure for working families. It's way past time that our taxes, our budget reflect our values and actually support working people rather than starve them.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to the last policy question here. Democrats have complained for years about how Republicans run the Capitol, killing bills without hearings, stripping committee seats, bulldozing bipartisan deals. If Democrats take the majority next session, would you let Republicans chair any committees and schedule their bills for hearings, or would you run it the same way they've run it for a decade and give us any specific procedural changes you would make to shake things up around there? Lauren, you're up first for this one.
Thank you. Yes. So yeah, it is a tough environment and it's pretty toxic down in the Capitol, and we spend our time as Democrats mostly killing bills. And but I believe obviously in collaborative governance and bringing people together. We were able to kill ICE in polling places by bringing community and involving community in our decisions. So I'm the stand. Oh, that's a little bit of Freudian slip. I hope to chair the government committee, and in the legislature, I'm the ranking member now. And actually, I've been working on a bill with Jake Hoffman, who's the current chair, to rein in the abuses of license plate readers. You know, you've heard of flock cameras. They're a gross violation of civil liberties, and they're harming immigrant communities, being used in ICE, being used to chase after women who are seeking abortions. And so I'm working with Jake Hoffman, and suddenly sometimes the different people on the left, people on the right come together. But I would definitely hear that bill as the standing member. But I have to say, all the other bills, I would say, yes, I'll consider your bill. But first, we got a big backload here. We have a backload of a lot of great bills that need to be heard first. So if there's time in this session, I'd be absolutely open to a thoughtful bill. But first, Democrats need to, resolve that backload and really create an affordable Arizona for all, and not just speak those words, but walk the walk and talk the talk.
Okay, thank you. And Deborah, what about you?
So to answer the question, I would not treat the Republicans the way that they have treated us. As a lifelong community organizer, I was taught that if you really want to move things forward, you have to build the biggest tent possible. You can't get things across the finish line necessarily only talking to people that agree with you, even within your own party. I spent years bringing people together, neighbors, business owners, civic leaders, elected officials from different backgrounds to get things done. And that's the instinct that I would continue to take at the Senate. Now, that said, there's a line, building coalitions on housing, water, economic development, business support is something that I can pursue hard, but it's not going to come at the expense of any families that we need to protect. I'm never going to trade reproductive rights, immigration protections, instability for communities, et cetera. It's not necessarily always going to be about compromise. It's going to be about good bills and letting those get through.
Okay,
thank you. May I speak to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I know Deborah spent 2 months in the legislature in the session, but the toxicity in the legislature is beyond the pale. And we've seen the ESA voucher system and possible reforms as an example of that. I remember Senator Kavanaugh told me, no reforms, it is a sacred cow. And I said to him, if it's a sacred cow, it is dead and dying, dead or dying, and is putrid, lying in the street, and we need to take care of it. So, we've seen in the past week, Republican attempts to really just use people as pawns in trying to perhaps enact some weak reforms. And Democrats stood up and said, no, we need to really rein in the abuses of the ESA voucher system. Again, as I said, I would collaborate on any good idea that supports the most vulnerable. But for the very first part of our session, we need to focus on the huge backload of bills that will really create an Arizona that's affordable for all.
Okay. Deborah, do you want to add anything? Or
I'm glad to hear that she's on the right path.
Okay, we're going to move on. Before tonight's debate, each candidate received 3 actual bills from this legislative session. I picked one of them to ask you about tonight. I'll read a short summary of the bill, and you'll each have 1 minute to tell the voters how you would have voted and why, and there's no rebuttals in this round. And just because I think this bill fits this district so well, I'll give you the same one I gave House candidates. SB 1431, Housing Design Standards would stop cities from forcing new developments to have HOAs, gates, or shared amenities, and would block cities from setting design rules for single-family homes. Cities could still enforce basic safety building and parking rules. Deborah, you're up first. How would you vote and why?
So this is a great choice because I know you already know, and most of the district does, that this is the singular difference between Senator Kuby and myself. You know, my vote always is going to come down to a simple question. Does this bill make life better for working families in LD8 or harder? You know, I knocked on a door last month of a man who was retired, and he said he was moving because he couldn't afford his HOA dues, which went up year after year, and he'd finally been priced out. It was a really hard conversation because he really loved where he lived. This bill would largely prevent Arizona cities and towns from forcing an HOA or a gated community or a specific architectural design on a single-family home, which can significantly increase the cost of a house. You know, leaving decisions to how a home is going to look to a homeowner rather than local government is the kind of local control that I can support. And I want to keep what's happening to that man from anyone else from happening over and over again. I'm not beholden to special interests, including our city zoning lobbyists, and I would have voted yes.
Okay. Lauren?
Well, I agree with Deborah here. This is where we disagree. And I voted no, and here's why. To those who call it an affordability bill, there's a difference between stating a goal and building a system that guarantees it, and this bill does neither. There is zero affordability requirement in it, no income restricted units, no cost controls, nothing that ensures a single home becomes affordable. Instead, what it actually does is remove local decision-making over zoning, design, and community standards. And that doesn't guarantee lower prices. It just guarantees less community input and poor construction. You know, I've seen from my time on the city council, when communities get involved, when neighbors get involved in the development process, they bring benefits to all. I could never imagine taking the voices of residents away. I saw too many projects that became better projects because the neighborhoods were engaged in the decision making. So, and, you know, for decades, I studied housing at the ASU Stardust Center, and I brought practitioners together to learn about affordable housing and the complexities of affordable housing. And I know affordable housing when I see it, and this bill certainly isn't it. Instead, the bill just removes community input. It provides no affordability requirements, and it shifts costs to taxpayers while giving developers more power. And essentially, this is a blank check for billionaire developers to bulldoze, build, and profit off our communities. And like this Steve Kaiser funding my opponent's race, he was a donor, and he, I voted no because I support affordable housing policies that actually work for working families and not developers.
Okay. I do want to add in a voter question here. Would you support expanding transit service to include inner city transportation? It's a question from a voter. Lauren, you'd be up first for this one.
Well, sure. And the city of Tempe has a very expanded free system called the Orbit system, which is essential for those most vulnerable in our community to get to places, to get services, but also, for students to get to ASU, and it ends up, creating a lot of relief of traffic congestion. So I would support that. You know, the city of Tempe has a transportation tax, as does Maricopa County, and this benefits residents directly. Serving on the Appropriations Committee as a freshman, it's quite the honor to be on the Appropriations Committee. We saw a lot of bills come forward, asking for investment in transportation. If we had unlimited money, I was so supportive and generally supportive. I'm married to a transportation geographer, for goodness sakes. But, we have some communities, some cities and counties that don't have a transportation tax, and they're asking the state to pay for all of that. And I think we need to have community investment. And yes, inner city transportation is so important for working families to get to their jobs. And we should be able to travel from city to city. We should be able to have inner city transportation as well.
Okay, thank you. Deborah, would you support expanding transit service to include intercity transportation?
Absolutely, hands down. There's also so much more than that too. I was talking to a gentleman who lives in a mobile house community on a very busy street on Hayden, and he mentioned to me that it's a very busy street and the crosswalks are really far away from the subdivisions enter and exit. And there was also a lot of apartments across the street with young families. And he mentioned how difficult it was just to even get across the street to the bus station. And a lot of the people that lived in his community were less mobile, older, and needed to take the bus system. So besides just obviously making sure that we have some great routes in our city, urban and suburban, making sure that they're safe, people can get to them, that they have shade coverage, it's all part of the issue.
Okay, thank you. And I want to add in one more voter question here. How will you incentivize city growth that does not destroy the desert? Deborah, you're up first.
So we have certain preserves saved. We have green spaces saved in our cities. We have general plans which talk about these. So I guess what I'm probably thinking that person may mean is environmentally friendly housing. But I'm not 100% sure on what they're asking.
Sure, fair enough. I think that's a good general answer. I just have as much information as you do.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. Lauren, do you have a response to that? Would you incentivize city growth that doesn't destroy the desert?
Well, it depends because all development is contextual. You have to look at a specific parcel, specific community, a specific city. We've seen bills in the legislature that really will encourage wildcat developments without an assured water supply, which is a real deep concern of mine. I've led on water issues at the Capitol and also helped create the Decision Center for a Desert City at ASU, which really brought together partners and tribal nations to understand the drought before us. So there could be incentive, but it would have to be a community that had very strong water protections and that followed that addressed the crisis that we are now in, our water crisis. So, you can't really answer this question holistically and say yes or no. It really is contextual. But I am deeply concerned about development that will really impact our water supply because we're in a serious drought situation in Arizona.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to a rapid fire round. These are yes, no, or short response questions. So try to keep it to about 15 seconds. You can add a short reason if you want, but keep it tight. Name a road, bridge, or intersection in your district that's been broken for too long, really needs fixing. Lauren, you're up first.
Yeah, I guess Mill and Southern is not a very safe. It's not a very safe street. There's high number of crashes there. I created the Vision Zero movement and project in Tempe where we wanted to reduce crashes, fatal and serious injury crashes to zero. And so I'm very much interested in and have listened to the experts at ASU. We need to create safer streets. We have experts at ASU. We know how to do this. There's the epidemic of pedestrian deaths on our streets, on our arterial roads, and we need to really pay much attention to this.
Okay. Deborah, what about you? Do you have a specific road or project?
There are quite a few that just recently got paved in Tempe and in Scottsdale and Phoenix that I've been on. So I'm really happy to see that. I'm going to pick a park, actually. I know you said bridge or road, but there is a bridge that overlooks a park, and the park down below in South Scottsdale from El Dorado Park South has had fencing around it. Kids can't play in the playgrounds. Dogs can't use the dog walks. They can't run on the paths. Kids and family members are forced to take the busy streets instead of take the regular walking paths that we should be having through those parks. And unfortunately, it has taken literally years for us to get those mediated, have the little ponds refilled, have the grass and sod put back in certain areas and some of the fences taken down. And honestly, that's just far too long.
Okay. Thank you. Next question. If Donald Trump were impeached and JD Vance became president, would you think America would be better or worse off? Deborah?
The MAGA agenda is the MAGA agenda. Things will long be affecting our state, whether Trump has been impeached or not.
Okay. Lauren?
I would say the same. I know you're asking a black and white question, but it'd be the same. We have so many Republicans who are complicit. They're complicit in taking away people's rights, due process, turning us backward in terms of environmental protections. And JD Vance is complicit in the Trump agenda.
Okay, thank you. We're going to take a abrupt turn into this one. What is your go-to coffee order? Lauren?
I just like it straight black coffee.
Okay, fair enough.
A cartel in my right down the street.
Okay, Deborah, go-to coffee order?
I like the hard stuff. I take Americanos, shots of espresso, hot water, and if anyone wants to meet Amy, who owns Cartel, she's throwing me a kickoff and a meet and greet.
All right. That means we've reached closing statements. Each candidate, you'll get 90 seconds. The order is going to be the same as your opening statement. So, Lauren, whenever you're ready, if you want to go ahead and do your closing statement.
Well, thank you. So, tonight we've seen two different candidates with two different visions for Arizona. One who would hand the keys over to the very same developers, utilities, and corporations that are raising costs on working people. And the other, I'm standing with working families and delivering proven progressive wins for our district. I've been really proud to stand up, to speak out, and to fight for you day after day. I've championed policies for working families. I've killed Republican bills very harmful to working families. And I've fought daily against the Trump agenda. And I've done it all knowing that I have the great honor of representing you in Legislative District 8. This election is going to determine the future of our district and whose voices are included in the conversation. And I'm proud to be the only candidate in this race. I'm the only candidate in this race who rejects contributions from lobbyists, corporations, developers, and utilities, because I want your voices at the table and not theirs. And during this campaign, I received a contribution from a lobbyist, actually, and I immediately gave it back because that's how serious I am about my commitment to you. And that's why I'm proud to have the support of Attorney General Chris Mays, Congresswoman Adelita Grijalva, Sierra Club, as well as 28 community members and elected officials, 14 progressive organizations, and 10 labor unions who recognize the people-powered movement we are building together. So if you want to learn more about my background, record, priorities, please visit my website at qbforsenate.com. Let's keep this district represented by an effective, proven, progressive. Let's keep QB and the state Senate, and I hope to earn your vote once more to build an Arizona that we can all afford.
Thank you so much. And Deborah, whenever you're ready.
Thank you so much, Nicole. It was a pleasure having you, by the way. Everything we talked about tonight is very personal to me. Housing, childcare, schools, water, reproductive rights, pushing back against what's coming out of Washington. And I think about these things every single day as a mom, as a small business owner, and as someone who grew up poor and someone that's been showing up for this community for over a decade. District 8 really deserves a senator that's going to build bridges and use every legislative tool available to protect the families here, but also someone who gives legitimacy to every voter, not just those that have a certain income level or job deemed worthy to listen to. We deserve a senator that stays accountable after getting your vote and who understands that fighting for affordable housing and fighting back against federal overreach is the same fight for working families of this district. And I have a wide coalition of support from labor unions and endorsements from progressive leaders in Arizona as well. I'm asking for your vote on or before July 21st. And I promise you that the same energy you see from me right now is exactly what I'm taking to the state Senate. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That concludes tonight's Democratic primary debate for the state Senate and Legislative District 8. Thank you so much to our candidates for being here and to our voters. Thank you for tuning in and informing yourselves ahead of the July 21st primary election. For official voter information, you can visit azcleanelections.gov.